white Ford Bronco from the O.J. Simpson case. Friends of Al Cowlings, who was driving the Bronco as police pursued Simpson before ultimately arresting him.
When O.J. Simpson died on April 10, 2024, the world was thrown right back into one of the most scandalous cases in history. It reopened old wounds, and opinions clashed louder than ever. But in the middle of all the noise, one voice had been silent for decades until now. For the first time since the scandal that shattered her family, O.J. Simpson's daughter has finally broken her silence with a revelation that didn't just confirm the rumors, but also stunned the world. How will her words change the way the world sees her father? Join us as we break down O.J. Simpson's daughter's revelation and what it means for the legacy he left behind. The day the world stood still. It all started when O.J. met Nicole Brown, a young waitress working in Beverly Hills. Their relationship started like a fresh beginning. By 1985, they were married, and to the public, it looked like the perfect Hollywood story. They moved through social circles effortlessly, photographed at events looking happy. When their children, Sydney and Justin, were born, the picture looked even brighter. But their reality was far from beautiful. The marriage collapsed in 1992 due to infidelity, and the divorce marked the end of what once seemed promising. What no one knew then was that the most devastating chapter of O.J. Simpson's life, and one of the most controversial moments in American history, was still ahead. Everything changed in one night, 2 years after their separation. June 12th began as an ordinary day for his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. The 35-year-old woman spent the evening with her family, having dinner at a Los Angeles restaurant. Nothing about the night suggested danger, but a few hours later, events were set in motion that no one could have predicted. Ron Goldman, a 25-year-old waiter from the same restaurant, went to Nicole's home to return a pair of glasses her mother had left behind, placing him at the center of a nightmare. That was the last time they heard from any of them. Sometime near midnight, both Nicole and Goldman were found brutally stabbed outside her home in Brentwood. The crime scene was shocking, and the news traveled fast, immediately shaking the city. What had happened? Who was responsible? And how could an evening turn so deadly? O.J. Simpson was in Los Angeles earlier that day, but he boarded a late flight to Chicago that same night. When police contacted him the next morning and he returned to California, they questioned him. Still, no arrest was made immediately. The uncertainty surrounding his movements and the growing media attention fueled speculation across the country. Then, the situation exploded into one of the most unforgettable media moments ever recorded. On June 17, 1994, prosecutors ordered O.J. Simpson to surrender. Instead of turning himself in, he disappeared. The nation watched the unfolding chaos as police searched for him. Hours later, he was located inside a white Ford Bronco, driven by his friend, Al Cowlings. What followed became a surreal moment that combined real life with television spectacle. The chase was slow, almost unsettling. Police cars trailed the Bronco at a cautious pace along Southern California freeways. News helicopters hovered overhead, broadcasting every second live. Millions stopped what they were doing as the chase interrupted regular programming on every major network. People stepped onto overpasses to watch in person as the Bronco glided past below. Inside homes, families sat in silence, captivated by the sight of a former sports hero, now the focus of a nationwide pursuit. More than 90 million people watched it all unravel, making it one of the most watched live events in television history. After roughly 90 minutes, the Bronco finally stopped at Simpson's home. The chase ended quietly. O.J. stepped out and surrendered to authorities. That moment marked the beginning of a criminal case that would consume America and remain one of the most controversial sagas in modern history. The most anticipated trial. When O.J. Simpson went on trial, the country followed the case. Court sessions were broadcast like primetime shows, and millions tuned in daily. What began as a murder trial quickly turned into a cultural earthquake that defined the 1990s. From the moment the trial opened, it was clear the two sides were headed in completely opposite directions. O.J.'s legal team immediately set the tone by attacking the integrity of the investigation. They claimed police handled evidence carelessly, allowed contamination, and rushed to blame Simpson without giving other possibilities serious consideration. Their message was simple. O.J. was framed by a system too eager to pin the murders on a famous black athlete. The prosecution, however, built their case around the idea that this tragedy was the result of a long, troubled relationship. They described a marriage marked by control, aggression, and repeated violence, painting a picture of a man whose temper had escalated over the years. Their strongest weapons were the physical clues: blood drops matching Simpson's DNA, shoe prints linked to a rare brand, and materials found both at the crime scene and in O.J.'s personal belongings. They also focused on what they called the missing hour, the period before Simpson left for his late-night flight when they believed the murders occurred. The glare of the spotlight only intensified as the trial went on. Every witness added new tension. Every piece of evidence added fuel to public debate. But nothing captured more attention than the moment the prosecution asked Simpson to put on the leather gloves said to belong to the killer. Millions watched as he tugged and struggled, the gloves appearing too tight on his hands.
This is People's 164A. Is that the right-hand glove? All right.
In a case already filled with controversy, this single demonstration created doubt that rippled through the courtroom and the nation. The trial stretched on for months, dominating headlines and splitting the public into fierce camps. The evidence was overwhelming. Others believed the investigation was so flawed it couldn't be trusted. By the time the jurors began deliberations, the entire country seemed to be holding its breath. On October 3, 1995, the verdict was read. In a moment that stunned both supporters and critics, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The reaction was immediate and polarizing. Some cheered, others were devastated. Simpson maintained his innocence, and the criminal case formally ended with that decision. But the legal battle did not disappear. In 1997, the families of Nicole and Ron took the case to civil court, determined to seek accountability. This time, the outcome was very different. After reviewing the evidence and hearing new testimony, the civil jury ruled that Simpson was responsible for their deaths. He was ordered to pay more than $30 million in damages, a judgment that followed him for the rest of his life. During the civil proceedings, more information surfaced about the hours leading up to the murders, including accounts, timelines, and investigative details that were not fully explored during the criminal trial. These revelations reignited public curiosity and raised new questions about what truly happened on the night Nicole and Ron were killed. Their deaths had already shaken the nation, but as new details came to light, the public began seeing the case in a whole new way. Once again, O.J. found himself under intense scrutiny, and each revelation only worsened his reputation and legal troubles. The crime that changed O.J. Simpson's fate. More than 10 years after the trial that shaped his reputation, O.J. Simpson once again found himself thrust into the national spotlight, this time not as a celebrated athlete or a controversial figure, but as the central player in a crime that changed the rest of his life. In September 2007, O.J. entered a Las Vegas hotel accompanied by several men.
O.J. went into great detail about this is surveillance video from that night when O.J. and a group of men went into the Palace Station.
His mission, according to him, was simple: reclaim sports memorabilia he believed had been taken from him years earlier. But what he saw as a personal effort to retrieve his own belongings spiraled into a confrontation that quickly crossed the line into criminal territory. Witness accounts painted a tense and aggressive scene. Voices were raised, commands were shouted, and most damning, weapons were present. What O.J. insisted was a harmless attempt to take back his property now appeared to others as a threatening and chaotic raid. Law enforcement responded with urgency. He was then arrested and charged with a series of serious felonies, including armed robbery and kidnapping. The story spread nationwide within hours.
O.J. Simpson has Las Vegas police arrested the former football star today,
reigniting public debate about his past and raising new questions about his judgment. For many, it seemed like history was repeating itself, but this time, the evidence was far more straightforward. The case proceeded quickly. In 2008, after testimony from victims and witnesses, a jury convicted O.J. on all major charges. The verdict sent shockwaves across the country, reinforcing the sense that Simpson's life had entered a new era of consequences. Judge Jackie Glass delivered the sentencing with unmistakable force. She condemned the violent nature of the confrontation, stressing that guns had been involved and that the situation could have easily turned deadly. Her message was unambiguous. This was not a misunderstanding or a dispute over personal property. It was a criminal act that carried real, life-altering consequences. Despite O.J.'s apology and his insistence that he never meant to break the law, the court was unmoved. He received a sentence of up to 33 years in prison, a punishment that marked one of the most dramatic falls from grace in modern American celebrity history. Prison life became O.J.'s new reality. In 2013, he sought a new trial, arguing that his legal representation during the robbery case had been inadequate. The judge rejected his request. That same year, he earned parole on some of the charges because of good behavior, but it wasn't enough to free him. The sentences were stacked consecutively, meaning he still had years left before he could walk out of prison. It wasn't until 2017 that O.J. appeared before the parole board again. By then, he had spent nearly a decade behind bars. After reviewing his conduct, remorse, and the circumstances of the case, the board voted to grant him parole. It was a critical turning point, the moment that finally opened the door to his freedom. When O.J. stepped back into society, the world around him had changed dramatically. The public no longer viewed him through the lens of a beloved sports hero or even the central figure of a legendary trial. Instead, he returned to a society shaped by new conversations surrounding his past actions. The question remained, after everything that happened, what kind of world was waiting for O.J. Simpson on the outside? O.J. was about to experience betrayal in the worst way ever. A shocking revelation. More than a decade after the murders, a new wave of controversy surfaced when Mike Gilbert, once one of O.J. Simpson's closest associates and his longtime sports memorabilia dealer, released a book packed with explosive claims. In it, he describes a moment that he insists was nothing short of a confession from O.J. himself. According to Gilbert, the conversation happened only weeks after Simpson was acquitted in 1995. He says they were in O.J.'s Brentwood home and that Simpson was heavily impaired after using alcohol, marijuana, and a sleeping pill. In that hazy state, Gilbert claims O.J. began speaking about the night Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were killed. Gilbert alleges that O.J. told him he had gone to Nicole's condominium on June 12, 1994, without a weapon. He says O.J. described Nicole opening the door with a knife already in her hand. Then came the sentence Gilbert says he will never forget. If she hadn't opened the door with a knife, she'd still be alive. That, to Gilbert, was the moment he realized O.J. was admitting involvement. But Gilbert didn't only claim to know what happened that night, he also said he played a part in how O.J. walked away from the criminal trial. He writes that he encouraged Simpson to stop taking his arthritis medication so his hands would swell, making the infamous courtroom glove demonstration more favorable for the defense. He even admits to helping O.J. hide profits from memorabilia sales so the Goldman family could not collect on the $33.5 million civil judgment issued against Simpson. These allegations were immediately met with strong objections from O.J.'s camp. Yale Gallanter, Simpson's attorney, dismissed Gilbert's story as pure fabrication.
I wanted to do everything that I could possibly do to give O.J. a shot at getting released.
Describing him as a desperate man seeking money and relevance, Gallanter refused to let O.J. respond personally, noting that Simpson was preparing for his upcoming Las Vegas robbery trial at the time. Gilbert's book goes beyond the alleged confession. He also reflects on the years he spent within O.J.'s inner circle, years he now describes as morally compromised. He says that he and others close to Simpson ignored repeated warnings about domestic violence. Arguments, police calls, and troubling behavior were brushed aside, he claims, because being associated with O.J. came with perks, access, and status they weren't willing to give up. His revelations did not emerge in isolation. By the time his book came out, several other controversial publications had already added to the public conversation. Thomas Riccio, a key figure in the Las Vegas robbery case, had released Busted, offering his own account of O.J.'s downfall, and the Goldman family had published If I Did It, the once-canceled hypothetical account O.J. wrote about the murders, using the proceeds to chip away at the massive civil judgment owed to them. Gilbert frames his book as an attempt to confront his past. He openly acknowledges that he enabled O.J. and benefited from his fame, and he offers apologies to both the Brown and Goldman families. But for attorney David Cook, who represented the Goldmans, apologies meant little. Cook made it clear that what mattered most was accountability, especially financial accountability, not remorse expressed in print. To Gilbert, the book was a long overdue confession, but it was just the beginning. What came next would shock the world even more. The serial killer once suspected of ties to the O.J. Simpson case, a name that briefly drifted into the O.J. Simpson's narrative, resurfaced in the headlines when Glenn Rogers, a convicted serial killer once scrutinized for a possible connection to the murders,
signed a death warrant for convicted serial killer Glenn Rogers, known as the Casanova Killer
of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, was executed in Florida. Rogers, 62, died by lethal injection at Florida State Prison, decades after being convicted of killing Tina Marie Cribbs in a Tampa motel in 1995. Prosecutors said he lured her from a bar, murdered her, and stole her car before fleeing across state lines. He was caught after a chase in Kentucky and sentenced to death in 1997. His execution came after more than 20 years of failed appeals. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the warrant, and both state and federal courts swiftly rejected Rogers' final attempts to halt the process, including a claim of newly uncovered childhood trauma. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene. Rogers was also on California's death row for another 1995 killing, the strangulation of Sandra Gallagher, a mother of three he met in a Van Nuys bar. With multiple suspected victims across the country, he became known as the Casanova Killer and the Cross Country Killer, and at one point claimed to have murdered up to 70 people, a statement he later withdrew. But Rogers' story veered into the O.J. Simpson case in 2012. A documentary titled My Brother the Serial Killer suggested Rogers might have been involved in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The theory centered on 2 points: Rogers' violent history with knives and his pattern of targeting women who resembled Nicole, petite, often with lighter or red hair, and in their 30s. His brother, Clay Rogers, insisted Glenn had privately admitted to being in Brentwood the night of the murders. The idea quickly gained traction online, fueling speculation that another killer might have been involved. For some, it became a tempting alternative to the long-standing belief that O.J. acted alone. However, Los Angeles authorities dismissed the theory almost immediately. Both the LAPD and the LA County District Attorney's Office reviewed the claims and stated they found no credible evidence connecting Rogers to the 1994 double murders. Their stance was unequivocal. Text wrapping break. We know who killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. We have no reason to believe Glenn Rogers was involved. Despite the official rejection, the suspicion lingered in the public conversation, largely because Rogers fit the profile of a transient, opportunistic killer who used knives and moved frequently between states. The timing of his known murders, which occurred in 1995, also placed him in an active period not long after Nicole and Goldman were killed. Yet no physical evidence ever placed him at Nicole's condominium that night. The speculation remains a footnote, never rising beyond theory. While O.J.'s criminal life and external controversies unfolded, his children grew up largely shielded from the media glare. Sidney Brooke Simpson was just 8 years old when her mother was unalived and her younger brother Justin was only 5. The siblings were primarily raised by their mother's family, allowing them to grow up with some semblance of stability despite the trauma surrounding their early years. Sidney focused on creating a life separate from her father's notoriety. She earned a degree in sociology from Boston University and built a career in hospitality and event management. She has participated in philanthropic efforts tied to domestic violence, honoring her mother's legacy, but has never publicly commented on Nicole's death or her father's actions. She maintains a measured relationship with O.J., supporting him privately during his prison years while keeping emotional and public distance from his controversies. Justin Simpson has taken a similarly private path, working in real estate and deliberately avoiding the media. Both siblings have chosen to define themselves by their own accomplishments, rejecting the chaos and notoriety that followed their father. What do you think of O.J. Simpson's case? Was he truly guilty of those crimes? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.